Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I will call this special called meeting of the Planning Commission to order. I guess you want to have public. Is there any cards?
I do have one card so far.
So, general comment? Okay. I'll call for general public comment, stuff that's not on the agenda.
You don't have to read
It is
Yeah.
Tim Becker.
I didn't bring it. She said I didn't have to.
And we're pretty informal. It's a workshop, so I'm
Right.
not forceful to people here. So.
Good evening. Are you going to cut me off after 2 minutes?
No, you got all the time in the world.
I'm kidding.
We'll cut you off now if you want.
5 minutes. I do have prepared remarks because I want to make sure that everything gets said that I want to say.
Speak. Maybe move that. Just double. Yeah. There you
Hello.
go. There you go.
My name's Tim Becker. I live at 15625 Canterbury Chase in Milton. And I'm with the Milton Coalition, and I think a few of you know me. I'm new to planning issues, but in the last several months I've learned a lot, probably 1% of what you guys know. I've watched your meetings online, and I'm impressed with the depth of your knowledge, your work ethic, your integrity, your objectivity, and your independence. As you know, I have strongly advocated that the city government let the Planning Commission do its work without outside interference. We need a single, rigorous process that abides by the best practices of good governance. City council members should not prejudge or otherwise undermine your work. Political advocacy and lobbying groups should not be allowed access inside the city government to exercise undue influence. The role of such groups should be limited to providing public comment. The Milton Coalition intends to be a watchdog over the process on a prospective basis. Outside meddling will be quickly reported. If necessary, we will again rally the public to support a single, clean, and competent planning process. So in closing, thank you for your service to our community, and please know that your efforts are appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that it?
I don't
Okay.
have any more comments, but I
Okay.
guess this will go.
All right. I'll close public comment, and then we'll just open it up for the first item.
Okay, sorry. We have a discussion regarding Chapter 50 subdivisions and create Section 50-162 rural design. Then it goes on through RZ 1518 through 23, all the various different zoning districts. And then finally, number 7, RZ 1524, is looking at a consideration to amend the rural Milton overlay for single-family type uses. And I think Kathy Field's going to just review over these. We don't have to talk about them individually. They're kind of like 3 different sections, so she can...
All right, yeah, if I may. Before we even get into content, I want to talk about structure,
Okay.
okay? And that we have literally 3 different ways in which we can put the content that we are about to discuss. All right, the first way was suggested by our attorneys, which is to take the content and create in Chapter 50, a Section 50-162 rural design, and that falls into the subdivision regulations, and that's appropriate. We do have development regulations within the subdivision regulations, okay? The second place that this can be done is in the various zoning districts. And as you see, we've opened up all these different zoning districts, all the single-family zoning districts. And so we could go into each of the single-family zoning districts and insert this content. And that's appropriate, too, because of the fact that we do have different development guidelines or regulations within the zoning text and within the zoning districts, okay? That is a more specific way of doing it because the draft that we're looking at under Chapter 50-162, under the conservation subdivisions, just really speaks to the AG1, and all the setbacks and everything are picked up from the AG1 zoning district. But we do have other single-family districts, so we would, in effect, have to go back into the subdivision regs and create a section for each of the single-family districts in order to reflect the appropriate setbacks and everything else. So again, that's just it's a technicality, but it really starts to, I don't want to say confuse, but I guess that's a good word. It puts a lot of verbiage in there. By putting it individually into each of the zoning districts, it keeps that all separate, each with their own setback requirements attached. All right? Now, thirdly, there's a third way of doing it, which is probably the most simplistic way of doing it, in that we do have the rural Milton overlay. Now, the rural Milton overlay overlays all of the single-family districts. So we could just make the change in the rural Milton overlay, and that will apply downward to all the different single-family zoning districts. So rather than going in individually and changing everything, I would suggest that we use the rural Milton overlay, which is an overlay overall.
That's in the zoning, not,
That's in the zoning,
Okay,
that's right.
yeah, okay,
And we
good.
can put this verbiage, and then each of the setbacks will be reflected as per the single-family zoning districts. But we don't have to keep replicating it, which we would have to do in the subdivision regs, or else when we go in and open each of the individual single-family districts. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Follow
so that's
what
clean,
I
at
was
least it's
saying?
cleaner. Right?
Yeah, so this would essentially be the minimum requirements for all residential developments within the rural Milton overlay. Is that
Right,
what you're
and-
telling
and
me?
Yes, and then each of the particular setbacks or side setbacks requirements would stay where they are unless they were specifically changed. For instance, we would specifically change the front setback to accommodate an increased rural view shed, for instance, is the way it's in here. But all the other setbacks would stay the way the zoning district calls for them to stay.
Right.
So in that example, Kathy, if you put it in the overlay, and you have the broad brushstroke stuff, and using your example, which is the rural view shed setback,
Right,
and you come upon an R2 application, though,
right.
where would that application then go for their, the nuances that affect them?
Into the R2 zoning district.
And then whatever, so let's say, just like even today in AG1, when a new subdivision comes in, whatever, they have to be consistent with the AG1 district, but then we have the overlay and we have the rural rural view shed. So not only do they have to meet the setbacks that are prescribed in the district, but they also have to do what's said in the overlay. And we have a saying, and not a saying, but it's a statement in the overlay that whatever is more
Right.
restrictive, you go by the
Prevails.
overlay.
Yeah.
So, i.e., if the frontage along Freemanville, it's not going to, whatever you guys end up, whether you keep to 60 or go up to 100 or something in between, then that would apply versus not doing it. So that's just, that's how we've done it in the past.
So I get your comment about the fact that it's less confusing if it's in the overlay.
Yes.
You got one place to go.
But they're all appropriate. We can make them all work.
Right.
Again, we're trying to look at it from, how you read this and where does the information lie best. So,
I would ask you to remind me, and you may, hopefully your memory's better than mine on this, but when we sat here the night with Ken, and we talked about, part of his mission was to make it simpler as well. I know there was a point that he was making that night about where he felt it should reside, and we hadn't necessarily gone there and given a chance to reassess all this stuff. Of course, we were dealing with the CSO at that
That's
point,
right.
and it was being driven by the CSO.
that's right.
With that off the table at the moment, how does Ken's comment
Good
then
question.
come back?
And I had Robin talk to the attorneys today with that very question.
Great.
And the answer is, Robin.
It's because I talked to him. But it's just, it can go either way, but what he said Paul Fricke, was that it's appropriate either way, whatever your preference is, whatever you feel like is going to be the most, not convenient, but easier to use, everyday use. So.
Okay, so then there's our ease of use every day. What about for the development community, when they're coming in and saying, if I'm a new developer to Milton, and I need to come in and understand your rules and regs, how is it done most other places, and how are we making it harder or simpler for them?
Well, I think we're just being consistent. I mean, we have an overlay, so developer comes in, he looks at the overlay requirements, and then he looks at the individual single-family zoning, assuming he's doing a single-family zoning district. He looks at that as well, so that they both apply. And that's why I can take this language that we're going to discuss, the content, and put it into each of the individual zoning districts, or I can just put it in the overlay, and the overlay will apply to all the individual zoning districts. So,
Can I grab Scott real quick?
Yeah, I
Sure.
know, Scott.
is he? Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yes.
Just in regard to that one. I know you're going to talk about the other
No,
stuff.
but this,
Okay.
this is very important from a design standpoint and from a client that comes in and has a particular piece of property. I like the fact that, okay, there would be in the rural overlay, but and I'm not trying to throw a monkey wrench or confusion, but I do not like the thought, if we're going to, I think we really need to then revise. I don't want conflicting setbacks, is what I'm,
Right.
I like for it to be black and white when, a lot of times you have a client that comes in and he's in a due diligence period, and the price of the property or the cost of the development that he's penciling out, and if I'm telling him, okay, we're going to set the rules down, and you can confidently predict that you're going to get a yield of so many lots based upon this. So I would just caution you, if you're going to change I don't think it would be that difficult to then go in and each of your Ag 1, R2, I mean, it's a chart.
Right.
So I would like to if you're going to change it, let's change it everywhere in the ordinance, just for the lack of. I mean, from not an attorney, but if I had a chart over here that said my R1 setback was 35 feet, well, I'm going to scream bloody murder somewhere in the process if that's not correct. And I'm going to, there are people that would litigate that, and I just don't see why you would. It's not, from my standpoint, rocket science to change the tables.
Yeah, if I could just comment
Yes.
back to you, but we do use the overlay all the time, and we do put a lot of things in there. So I would
Understand.
think in the due
Yeah.
diligence that you would look at both locations.
I know, but there are not, at present, many conflicts in the overlay.
With the single family, it's
Yeah,
very little.
and I don't, do you, I mean.
And I would see
sounds
that
simple
we
enough.
could
Yeah, I
create,
think it's a reasonable.
No big deal.
as of now, it was
Let's just do it. Let's make it
99%
user-friendly.
of the overlay, the rural overlay, was AG zone. So but now if we're bringing in some R1 and R2s in that, I would have a chart with building setbacks and, the rural view shed, whatever your building parameters, whatever they may be, and, it would refer in the rural view shed, see, building setback chart in the comprehensive land use plan or something. Are we revising the CLUP also with this? I mean, if you've got someone that has been in the CLUP with designation of R2 with certain setbacks, and they've kind of planned their estate planning, or this was their retirement plan, and all of a sudden, no, we're going to change that. That's kind of
Well, one of the things we're discussing is revisions to the rural view shed setback.
right.
So that is up for discussion.
Well, I think he was speaking of the comprehensive plan, but we're opening that up as of next week.
Yeah, that's because there are sections
That's
that
later.
are, I don't know, lower end of Hopewell Road that are, at one time were designated for a little higher density than ag zoning. And, that's just, well,
And I think we actually suggested to take out the R3, because I don't think there's going to be anything more denser than R3 down that low part of Hopewell.
not that, I mean, it would be an uphill battle for me to represent someone on trying to do that, but, I mean,
Yes, it would be.
yes. I mean,
But you would take on that client, then, wouldn't you?
I would, for a fee. But, and before I sit down, one thing that I want to reinforce, if you're not used to the process, you have your AG zoning, okay, so you work in it, and then you've got the subdivision regs. And, you know, that's a whole nother can of worms. And in that subdivision regs, there's also engineering requirements and the fire marshal requirements. And if we're going to if we're going to create this rural design, please let's get everyone on staff on board. Let's not design 18-foot wide roads without curb and then have a fire marshal that comes in and says, "Oh no, guys, that doesn't work." You know, because then I submit a set of plans and they're all red lined up, and we start back to zero. So, just
I agree.
my little
Absolutely.
2 cents.
You bet.
Good.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Scott.
So that brings me to my next point. But I guess, do you want to? I'm fine as far as where it goes. Cleaner the better, and the more simple and is in my book. So, what do y'all think?
Well,
Y'all good with
I'm
that?
definitely in agreement. I mean, simplicity is what we need. We don't need complicated regulations or ordinances or anything else. So, I mean, I think Scott makes some points. I think the thing we need to do is make sure there's no inconsistencies between the rural Milton overlay and each of these, the R1, the R2s, the R2As, and whatever. That's what we need to make sure we don't do.
And so that brings me to my next point as far as when we talked last week, Noel had a great presentation that explained all the, sidewalks, entrances, trails, everything. And so when I met with Kathy and Chris and Noel about how do we go forward and bringing up Scott's point as far as what we're going to try to do is work within this rural design that we have before us today and then formally ask council to give us the subdivision regs so we can work within that and then give them that. So we give it to them piece by piece, them understanding what our goal is. So if y'all could ask council if we could look at the subdivision regs as after we do this.
Sure.
You good with that, Noel?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So what topic we want to start on next?
Okay, so.
Viewshed or what?
So have we decided where we're going to insert this?
What was your third option?
Number 3.
Was put it into the rural
Overlay.
view
Was that the more simpler, easier to
Rural.
follow?
Yeah,
rural
Robin,
over-
why don't you comment?
The
since
rural
you deal
overlay,
with this
right?
every day?
Well, I mean, I think with rural, well, my least preference, and I think for applicability,
subdivision
would be to put everything in the chapter 50, the
The s-
rural design.
The subdivision
The
regs.
subdivision
Right, I
regs,
agree
right.
with that.
And then, I mean, obviously, to put them, I mean, I'm open either way, whether it's
I'll let y'all two just
the
knock that out.
individual.
All right, we'll figure
Does
that
that
out.
sound good?
Okay, all right,
Okay.
we'll talk to the attorneys more and.
But I agreed not in the subdivision regs.
Not in the
Yes.
subdivision regs, and to
Right.
keep it as simple as we can and in a way that's accessible to the users.
But to your last point, if you put it in the overlay, where it's really it overlays everything.
Right, it overlays everything.
Why not
Right.
start
Right.
thinking with it there?
Okay. All right, well, we'll look into that. We'll get some more further clarification from the attorneys to make sure everything is copacetic, and we'll go with that. If that's,
Okay.
All right, now, if you want me to go on with, I can give you an overview presentation, which I basically did the same one as I did the last time, but let me just go through it.
I say let's just stick to those three big
Yes,
things.
that's right, that's what I'm doing.
Okay.
Okay.
Kathy,
now-
you're going to do that? You're going to give us the big picture
Yes.
again? That'd be great.
I'm going to give you the big picture, and then if you want to go through it page by page or line by line.
And I have extra sets of stuff, so if you don't have it with you, then.
Before we
when
dive,
get to that
after
point-
you finish,
Yeah, right. I can-
I've got some sort of broad brushstroke questions I want to ask too, but I want to hear what you have to say first.
Okay, so my broad brush overview is, we've got three major items included in the content that we're going to be discussing this evening. And they are as follows. One deals with the rural viewshed, and that it changes the current rural viewshed to require a 100-foot setback, 75% which would be undisturbed, and it allows for 25% to be disturbed. Now, in that disturbed, you could put, for instance, a septic system, okay? Secondly, it moves the front setbacks on interior streets from 60 to 20 on those parcels affected by this 100-foot setback. Now, Robin does have a little chart that shows that, but the idea is that when your lot is on an exterior street and you've got to move it back because of this increased rural viewshed, you can move it closer to the interior street. You know, right now there's a 60-foot setback on the interior street. You can move it up to 20 feet. So you still have that same buildable footprint. We've just moved it back from the exterior street, moved it closer to the interior street. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Everyone following me? Okay. We provide language for a pasture so that when you've got what is a rural viewshed? Well, we're going to include the allowance for a pasture, that you don't have to vegetate. If you've got a horse pasture, you can have a horse pasture, okay? And we make that very clear in there. And then also for those structures that are on that rural viewshed, we will require a 360-degree architecture, because again, even though the houses are pushed back, you'll still be able to see them from the street, and we still want to make sure they have good architecture in the rear, so as you're driving by. And my best example is we had a recent house come in with the current rural viewshed we have. As you know, we currently review architecture, and this house had no windows on the back. So, so there is a reason for us to put that in, and I really think it's a good reason. So, all right. So those are the main issues with the rural viewshed. You want me to go on and put all three out there, or you want me to stop?
Sure.
Sure.
Well,
You can go on. Go on.
Okay. All right.
How about it?
I
Get it over
want you
with.
to tell me to stop. Okay. The second item deals with subdivision entrances. And as we looked at the rural viewshed, our thought was, well, let's simplify the entrances to the rural viewshed, because sometimes, depending on how grandiose they are built, they could adversely impact the concept of a rural viewshed. So we require a more simple design for entrance signs to begin with. We only allow for knee walls where topography is problematic. All gatehouses are required to be set back 100 feet, again, to keep them totally out of the rural viewshed. And no water features are permitted as part of the entrance sign, and that's to move away from the waterfall type of. Now, these are all subjective. This was staff's thought on what could simplify an entrance, and I guess we were using the Six Hills. I think I mentioned that. The Six Hills entrance is sort of our theme, is what we were trying to emulate.
Kathy, on that
Yes,
point, when we spoke before, and I thought we had put that in the discussion, was that we wanted the materials, it's the specifics, but also to be 360 degrees, where you're always looking at those.
Oh, you mean so the back of the wall?
Oh,
has to
the
be
back of the
finished
wall.
and
We
everything,
just
yes.
haven't amended anything.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
haven't
okay.
amended
You
anything,
haven't-
but if you'll hold that thought and bring it forward,
Okay.
and we'll put it in, okay?
No problem,
But,
okay.
yeah, we did talk about it.
Sorry.
I do remember that. And then the last item that we've included is the creation of conservation areas within all future subdivisions.
This is your third area?
This is my third item, yes. And it would require that a minimum of 10% of a subdivision's gross acreage be preserved as a conservation area. And we included in here what could be in that 10%. And we basically picked right out of the conservation subdivision ordinance those green space items that were either considered to be primary conservation areas or secondary conservation areas. And so we took that whole list and said that list could be used to define that open space. And then secondly, once that open space is defined, the areas must be protected with a permanent conservation easement held by a third party. Now, that could be a land trust, the city, HOA, or whatever, but the idea was that it would be safe. So,
I was laughing at Scott. I'm sorry.
oh.
He's about to have a heart attack.
So anyway, so those were the three proposed items that we came up with. Anyway, so
Okay.
there they are.
And I think just to throw out too, I mean, we threw out the 100-foot rural view shed. If you're totally objectionable to that, I mean, obviously you can make suggestions and all that on that dimension.
So I would like to start the conversation with the view shed, since that's his first on the list. If y'all are okay
Even
with
before
that.
we go there.
Yeah, go.
I just sort of wanted to take a minute and talk about our approach to this. Because if you think back, we had all this before to look at, and the hair stood up in the back of our heads the first time around, and we made a point on some of the stuff where we chose not to go very far with it.
Right.
Very different reasons at that point in time, but some of the foundation of those reasons still remain the same. So my question is, obviously we've got a working document in front of us that's a good place to start. But are we really bound to this document as the only way to start? Because what I really wanted to go back and take a pause on is the kinds of things that we heard from the community over the past several weeks. There's some pretty big themes that came out of that. One was, don't infringe on my land ownership rights, was a big one that I heard. One was that the city should take some responsibility for some of the preservation, not put the onus on the landowner. Another was, as we look at areas to conserve, this is my interpretation of what was said, this is not necessarily what was said exactly, but are we generating a hardship on the large landowner who's trying to do something that's still right in the long term for the city when we're imposing some hard and fast rules about how they would have to preserve some of that, not just in what they're preserving, but the fact that it has to go into a land trust and whatever. So I don't have an answer to what is my question, and my question is, if we just go back to the hard and fast what we have before us, are we not just sort of driving back to those themes that we heard were pushback from the community? And so the big question I'm asking is there another approach we can take besides just the hard document we've got before us? Are we better off to maybe engage in some conversation about some of those big theme things, which really to a great extent are captured in those three big ones that you just articulated for us?
Yeah. Well, I think the mayor has said many times, is that there are lots of tools in the toolbox to accomplish green space conservation. Now, we've got the TDR program. That's definitely one of our tools.
Yep.
There's been some talk about a green space bond issue, which will be another tool, and I think that certainly alludes to some of the points that you just mentioned, Paul. And this was just another tool in that clearly trying to respond to what is it that people object to as they drive down the roadway. And even Noel's presentation, I think, addressed that to some extent, is they want to see the forests. They don't want to see the back of someone's house. And so, we have achieved an expanded rural view shed to 60 feet now, 40 undisturbed and 20 can be disturbed with a septic system. and then the house behind that with a architectural review. The thought was, well, is that really accomplishing what we want, which is really not to see these, really to maintain that rural view shed. So this was an attempt to enhance that rural view shed with not taking away someone's right to develop that lot, because we still keep that buildable area, we just move it back. So it's another tool in the toolbox, and that was the approach we took on this.
Okay. And we know we have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
My concern is, though, that if we go just right back to this document without the possibility of engaging in a broader brushstroke conversation about what other tools might be in the toolbox besides just this document, are we getting right back into that, heavy snowfall rut road that the car before me went in, so I can't get out of their tracks because I'm right back in those tracks. I veered off for a minute when the community said, put a pause on, don't do this to us with the CSO, and boom, I'm right back in those same, tire tracks in the snow because I've got just this document to work with. One of the things, I don't know that it's a conversation that we can have from a legal standpoint with what the Georgia land rights allow, but can we go back and explore something as simple as we change our minimum acreage requirement for what you can put a home on? Right now, Fulton County, because of the septic system, primarily we said 1 acre minimum. Can we go back and say, for goodness sakes, let's review that, and maybe it's 2 or 3? What happens if we do that?
I think it's a whole different conversation.
I know it is. And that's why I want to engage this now before we dive into this, and we get so caught up in the document that we lose the opportunity to take a different path if other paths are available to us. So that's the big question I'm asking tonight. So before I'm prepared to dive back into this as our only tool, our only path, can we take a breath, and are there other paths that we can consider at this point? Certainly this is an efficient way to go back at it, but as I was preparing, the last couple of nights in my hotel room in New York for this meeting and looking at this stuff, I was scratching my head saying, man, I just still have to take a deep breath on some of the things we're asking for in this, because it goes right back to where we were before. Doesn't mean we can't have some of that stuff end up as a part of where we go, but having had the slate cleaned for us on Monday night, I don't want to miss an opportunity to say, what else can we do, guys, to launch the conversation? I don't have the answer to that, but I do know that I think that the community would be disappointed if we didn't figure out something other than just the beaten path we were on before.
I think one of the things that we need to realize, and I think Noah pointed out in his presentation he gave us, what is a rural view shed? I mean, it's all over the place. And I think we have to keep in mind that the topography, the surroundings, I mean, some of those, as he pointed out, that we've got houses that look very rural in a very rural setting that may be set 40 feet back from the roadway. I think it depends on the area we're looking at. I don't like trying to standardize everything to where it looks exactly the same everywhere. And I think the community doesn't really want that. I don't think anybody here wants that. If we do, we might as well just say, okay, here's a rule. You got to everybody's got to follow it. I think we're trying to take a round peg and stuff it in a square hole. That's what I think. And I don't know that it's going to work.
So, when mayor and council, they directed us to look at this document, correct? And that's kind of, it was where Paul was talking about the 1 per 2 acres and stuff. We have to work within this, correct? That's what they.
Well, we have to address
us.
that at
Yes,
some point.
yeah.
That doesn't mean it's the only thing.
This is on the table.
Talks about others, and don't forget, we're looking at we're opening up the comprehensive plan, and that's really where that needs to start. Actually, you all are going to be part of that conversation. But what is on the table tonight for consideration is this document.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I think what? Go shoot.
Following, as you previously said, following our meeting last time, we met with Chris Lagerblum and Kathy. And it was not I could be wrong, but it was not my understanding that what we were supposed to do is move forward on this, or move forward considering this, and that wasn't what I got out of that meeting. What I got out of that meeting was, hey guys, we're okay. He believes that the council's idea for us is to consider everything based on what we've learned over the last 2 years. And I understand that this rural view shed is a starting, or can be a starting place. I get you. But you know what? And this document may or may not be how we address that.
Well,
Period.
probably the rural view shed design, or whatever we're calling this, is the end tool too. We've got a beginning one right here,
Yes.
but to your point, Noel, I think the slate's been cleaned for us.
Yes.
At the end of the day, we do have to come back and write something that's definitive that goes back to a document like this.
Yes, sir. And
I'm
that,
not necessarily bound to the fact that I need to start with, A.
yes, because
on here.
a lot of times we do start with a document and we wordsmith it a little bit into something that's usable. I believe that we have the latitude to say, you know what, nothing in here other than the title is what we really have heard and what we feel needs to be done. And that was part of the reason why, and I'm with you guys solidly, that was part of the reason I was driving around trying to understand what I was supposed to be doing when I started taking pictures. And until we define the mission and the objective of what we're going to do, it would be wasting my time to try to say yes to any one of these things, because until we decide what the rural view shed is, what we're going for, are we going for the consistent look, or are we going for variety? Are we going for the eclectic mix where some buildings are closer as long as they pass the architectural test? You see that all over our area.
Yeah.
So I just don't know what. I'm just not ready to start with A, B, C, D.
Well, this shows me that we're looking for that uniformity. I mean, this is what this
Yeah,
is.
that's
I mean,
what I
yeah.
see.
But maybe that's not right. That's what.
Yeah, I think it might be appropriate for us to. First we have to recognize that at the end of the day, we have to get back to a document that somebody coming into the community to figure out whether they can develop here, or a landowner who's thinking about doing something with their property has a document they can go to and say, I can or can't do this. At the end of the day, we have to produce something. But before we get to that something, what I'm suggesting that we consider doing tonight is that we say, okay, Kathy, within the first topic, which was the big one, which is rural view shed, what does that really mean to us with the new input that we've got? And I heard a lot of pushback to the 100-foot setback, primarily from the landowners that's going to affect. From the person driving by,
Correct.
who has no financial investment in that, they're going to say, hey, great, I'm a beneficiary of that, but I've got no investment in it. So that's just one example of that. We also know that the next big section you've got is the subdivision entrances. That's probably pretty easy too. I think we've all heard ourselves talk about that before, where we're all for diminished, more insignificant rural type entrances, and we actually put something forward to them, I think, with some changes to that already. And we can come back to that pretty easily. But then we get to the third one, which is the conservation areas. I think, again, we need to take a breath. That's a big one. Because we know that in order to comply with some of the things that we've currently written in here, that we're subjecting those folks to some hard costs. I think we heard Mr. Bailey talk about in the range. I haven't verified his facts, but he suggested it could be in the $20,000 to $30,000 range to go through the legal process.
I don't think we're even going down that road of putting it in a land trust.
Right.
I mean, that's,
Well, we don't know that yet.
Right.
Right now, the document suggests it's in.
It's here,
It's
but
here.
no, I don't know anybody. No.
So like I said, I didn't come tonight prepared with the answer to my questions. I just came with the questions, and one of the questions could be tonight is, what do we do with the voices that we heard about what we want to do with conserving green space? And is that looking at, like I said to begin my conversation, looking at larger lot sizes? Is it looking at the bond? I think we need to have sort of in my mind, we have to have a bigger conversation before getting to the nitty-gritty on this.
Can we get a list of the tools available on the
I mean,
uses, restrictions?
But as far as what we have before us and what council told us, as far as Noel says, we have a lot of leeway on what we put in here.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if landowner X is allowed to develop, 100 lots on this 110 acre parcel, I mean, I don't know how much land conservation we're gonna do, to be honest with you. I mean, that's
Yeah, we know we have to
I mean,
do something.
all this is trying to trying to shift stuff around. I mean, this isn't going to be, this isn't going to be earth-shattering stuff.
I think one of the things we need to come up with is some kind of incentive for a developer to conserve the land. I think that if we can come up with that as a way to go, I think it'll answer all our questions.
And I remember that's been floated around as far as impact. Can you reduce impact fees?
No.
You can't do it at all. Just curious.
Can we do things with land taxes? City taxes?
Yeah, but I don't know.
I'm just
I
throwing
don't
it out
know.
there.
Of course, the city taxes are such a small
Right.
portion of
Yeah.
the whole tax rate. That's
Right.
the problem.
But,
We need to hurry up and secede from Fulton County, and then we
we can do what we
do our
want to.
Milton,
Yeah, right.
Milton County taxes.
Exactly. Not to defend that 10%, but let me just tell you where we got it from, so we didn't just pull it out. In that, if one does a CUP, which is one of our zoning districts, there is a 10% requirement.
But that's through rezoning too.
That's for rezoning, that's true. But we felt that that would be part of the cost of doing business in a sense. And again, it would be a way of garnering some conservation land. So
I know,
that's
but
sort
you're
of
garnering
where
it.
we came from.
I know. I know the word garner is a little. Yeah, you're taking that.
Yeah.
Well, I say collecting it is
I know. I'm just
I know.
saying.
But is there something that we can come up with that
can
will
come up with
give the builders some kind of incentive to conserve the land without putting a financial strain on the landowner who's trying to sell it and the builder who's trying to build it and the person who's trying to buy the house in that land? That's I think if we can come up with that approach, that we can be successful in accomplishing what this is supposed to accomplish. But we need that information to really approach it.
Well, probably at the end of the day, and the cost part ends up being put on to the new person who's moving into the community. Because the developer is not going to absorb that cost. He's going to put it into his total cost of his project and build it into the cost of the home. The landowner is going to...
His land's going to be worth less.
It's going to be worth, yes, because...
Well, maybe not. I mean, if a developer is smart enough to build a unique subdivision that maybe has 5 acres conserved in the middle for a little part for that subdivision, doesn't that potentially make the houses more valuable and make it something attractive and unique that you'd want to spend more money to
It
be
does
part
for the
of?
developer, but it does not necessarily for
The homeowners don't- you don't
the
think they get
original
more value?
landowner
The
who's
original
selling.
landowner.
No,
See
well,
what's
no,
going
I think they could still get the same price, and it's up to the developer to turn it into something that makes it more valuable. I don't agree with this. It's got to be voluntary. It's got to be incentivized.
Yeah.
But if they are smart enough to figure out a way to do it on their own to make that subdivision unique to itself, they're going to pay 100 an acre, whatever it is, period, and then they get more for it because they've created a unique place in Milton that no one else has.
Mark, I agree completely with you about that. The part that in that equation that I think is missing is if you're the landowner and you've got 50 acres right now and you want to make the math simple, $100,000 an acre, but $100,000 is 20 grand north of what an acre is currently going for today if it's going for 80 in town. But you say, but it's going to be worth more because you, Mr. Developer, are going to put something unique on it. You haven't generated the uniqueness. You just have generated you just made the land available.
But the land, I mean, I guess I think the land's worth what it's worth, and once you buy it, you develop it in a way to maximize your value. You're going to pay what you can get. pay for it.
Right.
And if they can turn it around and get more value out of it, then good for them. If they can't, then they get what they can do. So I don't think it really affects the seller so much as it's up to that developer to come up with a better way to make more money off it.
That I agree with.
So I don't think we're punishing the landowners by doing this that way. I think they're still going to get their best price, and then they can go get more for it if they do a good job. If they don't, then they don't get as much.
Depending on what we say is buildable land,
Yeah.
usable land. If we're adding additional setbacks and we're requiring a certain amount of commitment to preservation, the developer is going to say my yield isn't going to be as high.
Well, I'm taking this L out of it and saying there's an incentive, there's some other way other than mandatory.
Yeah.
I'm not punishing the seller with this.
Right.
He's going to get what he can get, and then the developer comes up with a way to maximize it without punishing the seller.
Yeah.
No.
I feel like that the opportunity is there where we have to reduce development costs, the cost to develop the properties. You know, you start with this 50-acre piece that you're talking about, and the seller gets what the seller gets. And what happens is that by the time we've added all of the development costs, and I'm talking storm drain, I'm talking sewers, I'm talking the curb and gutter, you know, all of these enhancements that a developer has to do on any piece of land, the more of those that you require, the reduced opportunity that they're going to be able to conserve anything other than the land that doesn't have the house on it. This is disturbed. So what I'm saying is, by the time you put all these costs on there, in order for the developer to get those back, he's going to have to max out how many lots they can get in there. And our opportunity is figuring out a way to where we can help them reduce this upfront number. You know, if you only had 10-foot streets in there, I know that's not possible, but if you only had 10-foot streets, then think of the amount of money that would not be poured in the land on pavement.
Right.
So
Yeah,
these things
I
are
think
what
you're
we
onto
have.
something. I think you're onto something.
These are
absolutely.
incentives.
What if we went down the path and said, I think to Scott's point earlier, you went from X number of feet required width roads to something narrower. No curb and gutter are required. No sidewalks are required inside a development. But when you get outside the development, if we're trying to create a linking of trails and pathways for the greater Milton on some of those areas, you do require
But do we need concrete walkways?
well, you know, I just read in the paper today about the trail, the trail
Yeah.
plan. Maybe it's you try to enhance the trail plan so it's pretty comprehensive. So when you get outside the subdivision, you've got access pretty quickly to a connectivity to the trail plan. But you take the cost of that interior stuff off of the shoulders of the developer, and you make it asphalt that goes to grass rather than asphalt to a concrete curb to a grass space to a concrete sidewalk to get the grass
Right.
again.
We need to figure out what are our minimum standards, not what do we want to see. It's what are the minimum standards that meet this rural design when we define what that is.
Let me get Scott.
Okay, just
Yeah, man.
a few things. We still have, my understanding, the 20% cap of impervious area on every lot.
The lot coverage?
Yes.
Yep.
So, understand, that means 80% of a lot on a public street, and I don't know.
It's 25. It's 25 on a private.
Guaranteed on a private, or you have to go in and
I think
ask for that?
I think it's 25 guaranteed on a
Private,
private.
yes.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're
75%.
at 75% of every potential subdivision that's going to come through is conserved to a certain extent. I have discussed in the past and we have in other municipalities, where when you developed the lot, you had, say, if you were a developer or a builder, when you purchased the lot, there were buffers in place during construction. So it's easier for a builder to, a lot of times, go in and, for lack of a better term, rape the lot
Right.
and build. Okay?
Yeah.
So, human nature being what it is, when an individual buys that lot, if you had put a parameter, a building buffer, for lack of a better term, in there, and forced the developer or the builder to preserve that section and just kind of clear the building pad, you're going to end up with a lot more trees and undisturbed area, because when the individual buys it, and it may cost the developer or the builder a little bit more to do that. But I think that's something, when you're looking about what are some tools that are in our toolbox,
That's perfect.
why can't we do that? Okay.
That's a great point, Scott.
That's a great point.
And I know I'm long-winded and.
No, that's great.
No,
Go.
you just-
That's why it's a workshop.
Okay, this is,
It's not long-winded when you're adding value.
right, okay, yeah, true.
Yeah.
All right, just, I grew
That's a
up
great-
here,
that's a
my
great idea.
Family's always been here, and then we own land, and this is definitely, not to preach, but I don't understand why we have, an angst with private ownership of conservation areas. In our subdivision regs now, you cannot develop the 100-year floodplain. You have in place the riparian buffer of 75 feet. It can't be touched. So, it's already in there. I don't know why I don't really care if Paul or Peyton owns a 2-acre lot with a stream through there that's a 75-foot riparian buffer. It can't be touched. Now, I know you could go in and do it, but, we have code enforcement or something. It's a lot easier now with Google Maps to, before in the past, someone could go in and clear all the, 40 acres and no one hardly knew about it. But I think it's not that hard for Mark Law or someone here to do an overview of the aerial photographs on something. But back to that, a lot of this property that you're trying to set up in a private or now a public, you can't develop it anyway. It's going to be preserved. Mm-hmm. So I don't see spending a lot of time and effort on something that they can't. I feel like Milton is what it is because of the people that came before, preserving areas that they knew, don't go plow in that section if it's going to be flooded next year, so it was left. So I don't understand a lot of effort on creating these. I understand the CUP setting back and that, but if it's already preserved and we're, only 20% of the entire subdivision can be developed with impervious, then 75 or 80% is already preserved. You can't develop in the floodplain. You can't develop in the riparian buffers. I guess there's some of the, we have to go out and do a specimen tree survey and make sure that these groves of certain trees are preserved. And if not to say that you can't, but there's a monetary disincentive for you to do that with replacement trees and that type of stuff. Let's see, incentivizing. We inherited from Fulton County about maybe 3 years before the city of Milton was formed. We'd always had an exemption plat process that if you had property and you were on a public street, the best one, if you guys are familiar with Summit View Farms, Gravel Road, Cowart Road, Summit Road, through there. We developed that subdivision. It was Dr. Walker's estate. His daughter wanted it to look like what she grew up with. She had developers that were offering her a lot more money to come in, 1-acre lots, put in paved streets. She did not want to do that. But we were able to use the unpaved street with 3-acre minimum lots, and there are a few 3-acre. They're mainly 5-acre lots or larger. But then they limited the minor subdivision plat to 3 lots. So we're dead. But what would be wrong with a guy that has 10 acres and he puts a 2-acre minimum on his lot sizes, that he could do 5 lots under the MSP where, they do small streets or something, glorified driveways. And you've avoided, 5 more lots. To me, the whole purpose of this is, or the mission statement, the perception of conserving or big lots, rural design. Otherwise, you're just Alpharetta and Roswell. And as much as a 1-acre subdivision is a lot different than some of the other stuff that's being built around us, I think if you ride through North Valley or Summit View Farms or Pleasant Hollow Farms, as opposed to White Columns or Triple Crown, they are 2 separate entities. And, we can't, with the rules in place, economically develop another North Farm or North Valley. That's a travesty to me. That, if I've got another Dick Goodsell that's got 100 acres, why can't we have unpaved streets? Well, here's the subdivision ordinance that has a chart that says what kind of streets and curb and gutter and sidewalks and that type of stuff. So, I understand I'm rambling, but if you could spend a lot of effort on looking to find incentives and loopholes. I know I've discussed with Carter that the changes to the state Clean Waters Act has caused some problems that have to be addressed. But I do work in Cherokee County, and we're still cutting little streets in and doing 5-acre lots without detention ponds. So someone has figured out that there's a way to use your impervious area versus your untouched. And, you're saying, well, by the time the water runs across 500 feet of field or stream, they're making it work. I don't know how, but they're making it work. So, anyway, thank you for your time. I know
It's good.
long-winded.
It's perfect.
Thank you, Scott. Very good.
So I guess,
So that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about.
oh yeah. So what changes? I guess that's what I'm saying is, I know a lot of that was the subdivision regs, which we all know we're going to see and we're going to make changes to. The building buffer he brought up is a great idea. It's something that I think the whole I think we've heard that from the community. Because the building buffer, does that go into this or does that go into subdivision regs? If there was a
we've talked to Mark Law about that. There's been discussion internally.
Oh, there
about
is?
it. Because when a developer comes in and he comes in with his land disturbance permit in AG1, he has to put together, he figures out, like Scott was saying, where are the streams, where are floodplain, where are the specimen trees, and then Mark kind of delineates, this is where I want you to stay out of clear cutting, and you can have your area that you're going to do your house. Now, not all developers are made the same. There's some that
That's
are very
why
good at
we
it. There's
need-
some
yeah.
that like to just do, take everything down or totally mass grade, so they don't have to do things later. And so what happens, though, is so the developer stays out of that tree save area or buffer area, but there's nothing for us to keep the individual landowner, once they get possession of the lot, to keep it the way it's supposed to be. And I guess that's just another tool that we need
and
to...
that was really
Correct.
an issue
Right.
from Mark Law, saying that, he does, he thinks he does a fairly good job of protecting the trees during construction, but once the landowners come in, he said, then it's really a different ballgame. And that's something that he...
And so then that comes to, landowner rights. I mean, we keep on butting against that. It's like we want A, but then it causes an effect of B that, okay, we're telling this
You know how I
landowner,
feel.
okay, you have these standard
Don't tell me they
trees,
can't
but
do
their
Yeah,
kids
if I want
really
to cut down
want
my tree. Yeah.
I mean, their kids
I
really
know.
want a swimming pool. Well, you can't have trees in a swimming pool.
Right.
So, it's a hard thing to figure out. What's
But
the balance?
I think the building buffer is at least a good start to something like
Until
that.
you want a swimming pool, or
Yeah.
until you want
Well,
an
yeah, then
accessory
yeah.
structure,
Right.
or until...
When we
have a
talk building
sport
buffer, we're
park.
talking about every individual lot? Are we talking?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I hadn't heard it described that way before, or that as the definition of it, but that's something that's.
But
I
you know, at
think
least
that's
I think that's probably a good step to go on.
And
But if
it's
the
not-
individual landowner wants to come in and build a swimming pool, then they'll come in and,
Well,
you know.
they'll come in and
They'll
ask,
come in and
and
ask
get
for
the
a
building
swimming pool and
permit,
they'll do
and then you look at it, and I don't think we need to be preventing someone
Yeah,
building a swimming pool in their backyard if they want to.
Well, you don't go buy a lot full of trees and 2 weeks later go, I want to cut all those trees down now so I can put a pool in. You say no.
You hope not, but you never
And
know.
it's a no. Shouldn't have bought that lot.
I bought a house that had 22 pine trees that I had to take down and put my pool in.
Well,
Yeah, I think you know, just leave it up to the landowner. If the landowner wants to put a pool, they'll put a pool. If the landowner doesn't want a pool, the trees will be saved. I mean, but at
Some
least
people just want to have a manicured landscape.
Right.
I remember that situation, maybe Paul does, or whoever was here in the very beginning when Canine Assistance came in with their
Yes.
revised use permit, and we had the subdivision adjacent to it, to the people complaining about, you know, this is going to be horrible. Well, there's some people, I want to look at the horses, but at the same time, look, you have this house right next to me. Well, Mark took, aerials of different years, and it was that very specific landowner who had taken down
taken
their
all the
trees,
trees.
Like
and got rid of whatever
100 feet
protection
deep
they
worth of
had.
trees.
Right.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So he had no.
I wasn't here on that.
He lost that night.
Yeah.
So it was just a very
Definitely.
interesting example of how people can react to different situations. But
and to another point, the minor and major plat, I've heard that brought up before. Has there been any discussions about that, as far as what Scott mentioned?
I mean, we haven't really discussed
As far as
it, yeah.
upping the
number of lots.
number of lots to, because
And
I have
I
heard
don't know if it
that.
has something to do with stormwater in part. It may, and I don't know how Cherokee does what they do, but anyway, it's something we can look at. Or
Yeah, because I think that's what's the purpose of Knoll stuff. Is like people want the North Valleys, so how do we make it the North Valleys? And if there's anything conflicting in here, then let's change it.
Yeah, and while you're talking about these major and minors, and I don't know exactly how we'll get to each of these things, but to my way of thinking, the way when you're adding these, when you're going to add this section 50, I guess, in the rural overlay, I think that this should affect all properties that are along the rural viewshed, whether it's a 2 or 5 acre piece, whether it's a minor subdivision or a major subdivision. I mean, essentially, what difference does it make? Everybody should be obeying the same rules. You shouldn't have one set of rules for this guy and a different set of rules for this guy. I mean, these are the minimum standards for our rural town.
Yeah.
Why would a 10 acre guy have different rules than a 50 acre guy? Just to me, the view is the view. What
You
difference?
talking
does
about
it
the
make?
view shed?
Well, I'm talking about this particular section.
Got it.
Whatever we're trying to maintain along our roads, no matter what we decide that is, it should be consistent for each of the players, no matter what size development you're putting in there. That's how I feel about it.
Well, while you're on the view shed, because I know there's some people out there that they called me and had questions as far as the undisturbed buffer. That still counts in your buildable. That still counts in your buildable. What you can, your total. I mean, it still counts. Okay. So as a landowner, right now, is this only for development, or is it going to include all landowners, no matter if you're not putting in a development or not? As far as
I mean, it would only apply like if you, I think to Noel's point, whether you had an individual property owner who was building a new house versus a developer who had 50 new houses.
Okay.
But if you're just living there now, you don't have to
there's
do
nothing
anything.
different
Right.
that I can't do. Correct.
I mean, you don't have to retrofit your lot to fit this, but if you do a major, if you're building a new house
On an exterior street.
on an exterior street, then you would, I mean, we even enforce it obviously now with the 60-foot, as well as, and I know Scott's familiar over on Wood
should be
Road.
consistent.
Yes.
There was an issue with, and we do, the issue about the pastures that a landowner wanted to create more pasture, and we kind of had to work through that it was okay for them to develop a pasture because that's AG1, and that is,
Right.
that's okay. So it goes the reverse
should
even
be.
to what Kathy said. It's okay to take down trees to create a pasture.
Okay, good,
And we
okay.
kind of clarified that with that situation.
How
So,
big's
and that was one individual property owner with a large parcel, or it could be a 1 acre lot person just doing a one-off house.
All right, that's
How
good.
big's a pasture?
I had a question for Scott.
It depends on the land. It could be any size. And part of what we determined too was if you just had a random person who had a house but had no barn and they said, I want to make a pasture, and unless they could show us proof, like a building permit, I'm going to be doing it, that was part of the reason why we were open to that it wasn't a backdoor way just to take down trees.
Scott, did you see this that Robin did with the undisturbed buffer and the setback? So,
I did not.
Here, I'll give you.
I guess my question to y'all, to you as a developer, when you're doing this, is it really going to have that big of a material impact on the landowner?
The,
You're going to push the houses up front for taking it more in the back.
Okay.
Is that?
well,
And I think
My-
we should talk about the septic issue.
yeah, that's my, I would prefer that the wording in the rural view shed be that that has to be set aside for the reserve septic system. So, I mean, I understand we can pass every rule, but when I've gone back into Buckhead on failed septic systems, if we put this rule in and we say that this buffer does not, that you can't put a septic field in it, if their initial system fails and their two options are not foreclosure, eviction due to public health, the state and county is going to come in, or we did this in Huntcliffe, you're not going to condemn the house, they're going to put in. So, I mean, if this system, if your original system fails, any one of you guys would be in the same boat. You're probably not, your option of eviction or place a reserve septic system in this rural view shed, you're probably going to say rural view shed. So, I would like for it to be worded that the initial system cannot be placed in there, in the rural view shed. But, I mean, with an acre lot and a 5-bedroom house, if that initial system fails, you're going to be looking for room to put that reserve system. But, hopefully that's 30 years down the line. So, just put it in your initial system, cannot be placed in the rural view shed, but the reserve if the catastrophe hits. And that's my only concern about the setback. Has there been any thought, like on our secondary exterior roads, Taylor Road, some of the roads that are very rural, any push to say, hey, you're going to develop here, but you're going to front the houses or the lots along Taylor Road, you're going to front those and not give
Without
us
having
all,
the back?
Yeah, not all have back-loaded lots along. Now, I understand Birmingham Highway, Hopewell Road, the main thoroughfares, but our mountain roads, Taylor Road, the much less traveled roads, is there any thought to, hey guys, you're going to have to, Mr. Developer, I know this is not your first choice, but you're going to front load some lots, and
Good point.
you're going to bring a driveway in off of that. I mean, it has to meet
Side in.
but if our point is we want to feel like you're driving down a country lane, and preserve, because when I grew up here, everybody fronted on the street, and you had driveways. And you were looking at the front of the house, and also if it is the front of the house,
Hey,
you're naturally going to push it.
just sit right
further
here.
back.
Chris is gone today.
I'm sorry. It's
Just
just
sit right here.
It's very important.
That's awesome. I mean, that's exactly what I think we've been trying
Yes.
to get.
And
Yeah.
Kathy, and this would be complicated, and there'll have to be some rules, but isn't there a way to where you could say that some percentage of the houses could be closer to the road. If you're putting up 10, 2 of them could be closer, or some garage type structures that met the architectural requirements of a barn or something like that were close, could be within this buffer. But because we have those now. I mean, they're out there. I brought a bunch of pictures of them. Some of the structures are kind of closer, so it seems like in order to have variety and not just one consistent look there, we want to keep doing that. I don't know how to be the one, but
We would write that in, that would be the Director of Community Development's discretion. If there's, X number of lots.
yeah, not to exceed something percent or whatever.
Yeah,
That-
Kathy
where-
has the discretion to say up to, 40% of the lots need to be front-loaded, or can be, or not just front-loaded, but closer to the road or something like that.
I may be cutting my throat from a business standpoint.
I think
but
you-
it's,
You
but it's
already
about-
have.
You already did.
You're done.
Too late.
About 20 feet from me to you guys,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. That is too close
Amen.
for a rural community.
Right. Yeah, because
I-
most
So-
houses in a rural community that face the street are a good
I
75.
mean, I
100 feet
understand
back.
that, if I live in White Columns and and I love riding down the countryside, but the new subdivision there, but when you pull in that subdivision, it's not what I would want with houses 20 feet off the curb.
Right.
Also,
Like in
we're
Crab
not
Apple.
South Georgia or Florida with topography. You can't make your driveway and grading work in 20 feet.
Yeah, it'd be like-
So,
it'd be pretty steep.
yes,
Yeah.
it would. I mean, you don't want to go over 12% on your drives or your slopes, and your front yards would look awful, and it would end up being stacked walls, and not as far from rural or picturesque as you could get. I liked the increase from 60 to 75 better than 100, and take that on the back side of the 20 feet, in my opinion, and my developers may all be lining up to go somewhere else because but that's going to be a hard sale, and it's not what
Well,
I
I
think Milton should look like.
I think what you've done is you've cut off your nose to spite your face on that, because you've created this rural view shed area, but you've really screwed the interior neighborhood folks, because their view sucks.
And I understand because
But it's not all the
point is
houses.
that-
It's just a few. We're talking. It just
Well-
depends on. Everyone's going to be different. You may have a lot of houses that front the arterial road, and you may have just a couple. So your point's well taken.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
just saying, it's not
I
every
think-
house in the
I
neighborhood
don't know
now
that
is going to be
it's-
20 feet
Yeah.
away.
Yeah, cookie cutter, but
I mean,
Yeah, it's tough.
I think an example, I don't think just because you're 20 feet or 25 feet away from an interior street, so you have the subdivision off of Batesville that came in for the CUP because of the topography. I mean, most people who I talk to really like that. Obviously, it's not for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
Right, but I
but
couldn't-
the life is a spice of life. It doesn't
Variety.
mean that every subdivision and every lot has to be 20 feet away. It's just, that's a choice, and it's by far not the majority of subdivisions that would be that way.
Right, but here's a real life example though. In a 20-foot setback, I have not a very big boat, but I couldn't bring my boat home and park it in my driveway because my boat and trailer
Then
and
don't
tongue
buy that
would be
lot.
longer than that.
And by the way, we're going to outlaw boats, period, so you don't have to worry
So-
about that anymore.
We're gonna what?
We're going to get rid of boats, period, in
Yeah.
this.
You couldn't
So-
have one in my neighborhood.
That's a
I
garage
only
on the
bring it up
front.
for
Most
one
houses,
day.
you don't have the garage.
So I guess the question is, if we're going to preserve the rural view shed, so are you saying decrease the setback, or are you saying in the back?
in the back,
Okay.
now what I saw was 100 feet, and going from 60 to 100.
Right.
And then 20 on the side.
Right.
I, myself, would like going from 60 to 75 and then doing the math and taking it off. And I understand, it's not everything in cookie cutter, but if our mission statement is a rural look or rural preservation, there's very little rural about a 20-foot front yard before the house is.
Right.
So, I understand, it's not, forcing everybody to build in there, but there's going to be that's like, some people do not like the thought that the minimum lot size is 1 acre, but that's part of the AG zoning. And, if you don't like 1 acre lots, you like 15,000 square foot lots, there's other cities and
Right.
other plans.
Correct.
Yeah.
And
Well, 75 is what we, in our first pass on this, said.
There's 60.
No,
we took
we,
it from 60
we
to
cut, we
75.
went from 100 feet to 75.
And could you just clarify then, Fred, about 75, what is disturbed and what is undisturbed?
Right.
That's what I don't,
An undisturbed 25.
Yeah.
And disturbed is 25.
so 50 and 25.
Yeah,
No,
yeah, 50 and 25. It was total 75.
when was that, last meeting?
No, a couple meetings ago.
Well, I was staying with the 60 myself.
Oh, okay.
Is it, and is this, the
I mean,
75 feet
it
is,
doesn't mean that a front setback has to be 20. It just gives the flexibility that
you
you
could
could go
do
up
that.
to 20. I
And
mean, it
then,
doesn't
and in
mean
this
that-
case, the road could move in there, and if the guy just didn't like it that way, he could
I don't
move his
remember that
road.
at all.
I see your point there, but is this 75 feet
Maybe
from
it
the
was
right of
first
way?
time around.
So is this
Where is that from?
Is it possible that, we've got parts of Milton that are rural still, but we have parts of it that
Aren't.
passed rural, not being rural 20 years ago. If we identify this areas of Milton which are still rural looking, we can apply stuff to those areas that are different from the non-rural areas.
I think that was a discussion I think we had at some point. I don't know if it was internally or not. I think that was something I had suggested long time ago internally, and we just kind of thought, well, that might become too cumbersome, but.
It will come up in CPAC when we're looking at what
Yeah,
future land
that's
use looks
something you
like.
could,
Yeah.
yeah.
But back to Noel,
It's kind of like the character areas.
ask your question
Yeah.
again, because I was going to ask it too.
The 75-foot measurement, is that from the edge of the right-of-way?
Correct.
So, okay, so the right-of-way's there, plus 75, plus 25 in this particular drawing.
Well, it's
Yes. Right.
it's to the property line, which would be the right of way.
Yes, but that's right, you had it right.
We debate this every single time. So
Okay.
right away is X number of feet from center line of the road.
Right, and typically you typically have 10 to 15 feet from the edge of pavement
Right.
to
Right,
the end of the
okay.
right of way, so. It
So you've got
varies.
75 plus 10 or 15.
Right.
Yes, that's right.
So
Plus 25.
does this go back to the whole argument about taking, if we said, I know I'm saying something contrary to what I've already said earlier in many meetings past as well, but if we were to go to 100-foot setback and we didn't change the interior, that's then considered a taking?
I don't think it's still considered a taking, because you could still develop, but it's just.
Right,
would
so that's
be
my point.
harder
That's where I wanted to
on-
go with this. I wanted to explore this conversation or explore this thought, and that is, so if you don't, so you say you go to 100, and you don't change the buffers on the perimeter of the property either, because there's the debate about, are you imposing yourself then on the adjacent landowner that owns the 5 acres next to your 20 that you just sold? So if you didn't change any of those, but you just changed the rural view shed, it is a smaller yield potential on the lot.
Right, but you still yield lots. I
You
mean,
still
it's
yield
pretty,
lots,
it's,
Which is what I think what
Ken's
Ken's argument was, right?
I mean, I think that's gonna be harder to
And
to
you don't
stomach.
have to
but-
push it up to the 20 feet, but if you want to put a pool in the back, you might want to, or you want to put a barn or something. And so it gave you the flexibility.
You had 25
Being
feet.
able to expand that buildable area, to maximize it so that you really, foot by foot for foot, linear foot to linear foot, you're just taking it and moving it from here to here, is what you're doing. Same buildable area. But it doesn't mean that you have to go all the way up there.
I'd just like to find a way to incentivize the landowner, or the developer who's thinking about coming and buying those larger parcels of land to end up with larger lots. We don't use the 1 acre minimum as what ends up being reproduced everywhere. You end up with 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 acre estate lots instead. I don't know what those incentives are. It's something, I think it
Gotta
has to
be
do.
a lot.
It has to do with something, I think, with setbacks. It has something to do with infrastructure costs. It has something to do with,
I mean, one would say that if you had a shorter front setback, that's less driveway, it's less concrete, it's less whatever, versus a 60 or 70 or 80 foot long driveway that you have to get to your house. I mean, it's like, that is
right.
a little bit less money that you have to invest, and to get to the water line and to get to the, whatever. So,
But
there's two sides to every story.
yeah,
I suspect.
what I want to balance is a landowner that's going to sell their property, and they've been of value to Milton, and we appreciate the preservation that they've given us historically. They've got 20 acres, but they're done and they're moving away, and they sell it to a developer. They don't need to look back. And what do you do with that person, that developer, who again is only going to develop and then be gone? Theoretically, they're not Scots. They're going to be around for a long time, but they're just businesses that move through and move on. Versus the lovely couple, I don't know their name, but the older couple that wants to give some of their land to their children. Is it Willis's or Wills? Do you know what I'm talking
Like
about?
the seven
Laura?
lots or whatever.
Yeah, they want to.
I don't remember their names.
Willis?
Yeah.
So the Willises.
Birmingham Highway and Landry.
Yeah, lovely couple. Been here forever. They've got a couple of kids and grandkids they want to leave some property to. How do we still allow them to do that, where they're subdividing their land and not impose a taking on them, and yet put some bigger pressure on bigger lots on somebody who's not staying, because they're staying. It's staying in the family. How do you balance that?
Well, I
Or
mean, I
somebody
think
like
I've
that
heard-
that you want to protect.
I think people who own land and that they want to, Scott could probably address this too, but what I've heard complaints of is if I want to subdivide my land, and let's say into 3 or 4 lots, and I, want to have those lots fronting on whatever, Birmingham, then you're required to do sidewalks or
Yeah.
pay into the fund, and that can be a lot of money,
Yeah.
right?
The biggest travesty in the city is if you're on the side of the road that the trail is proposed for,
Right.
you pay for everything. If you're on the other side of the street and I yet to find anybody that can say this is not a system-wide improvement, the trail system. So when you guys are doing this, I think both sides of the street needs to pay into the trail enhancements. So
For sure.
I don't know how.
'Cause it's an amenity that both sides
Absolutely.
benefit from.
But it is, we have, several clients that come through, and it's calculating now about $48 a linear foot to pay into the fund. And if you've got 1,000 feet of road frontage and you're wanting to give, say, you've got 10 acres, you're going to give your child 2 acres over here, you don't just pay on the 2 acres, because you bring,
Pay the whole
because that
frontage.
that division plat, you've got to prove that the lot, not only the new parcel, but the parent parcel meets all the zoning and all the classes. So it's in the subdivision too. So you're paying both ways. If, once again, it's back to, if I've got 20 acres and by the time I'm through the development process, I've got $500,000 worth of infrastructure costs, guess what?
I'm going to max it out.
Maximum yield. I am maxing this thing
Darn
out.
right, you are.
So, if there is a way to, I wish that, and I don't know if it was legal in the impact fee, that we would have, or in every developed lot needs to be paying into the trail fund. Sorry, I've got a cold. But that would spread the cost out for everyone, and maybe you would then incentivize some of the other. I've got a client now that is an elderly doctor, has owned 30 acres of land on a gravel road for many years. and he's ready, he's at the point, he's through, and he needs to do. And I've had to kind of meet with Robin because, we had gotten into no more gravel roads. Well, if you're on a gravel road, and then you've got to go and pave that, and that's, now then there's a fight, but, if we allow a private street like in the Manor, and they maintain it, why can't you have a private dirt road with that homeowners association? It's their problem. If it gets rutted,
I agree with that.
then that needs to be in the ordinance.
That's rural.
That is rural, and you're going to have a 3-acre minimum because
If we're giving someone if they're going to do 3-acre lots, just
Why wouldn't you do it?
what do you want to do? Just do it.
Right.
Honestly.
And if you're gonna say you can't
You're going to save a
touch
lot
more
of
than
money.
20%, I mean your footprint is such that it's
That's kind of exactly what I'm thinking.
ooh,
And I think
that's what
that's-
I've been thinking, but
I think that's what the intent of all this is to
Right.
get to that type
that's
of.
our mission statement for the
Yeah,
city,
I-
isn't it?
Again, we don't want to make everything the same.
I know we are all over the place, and I don't know how we're going to get to
No,
order.
but we
two-
have to do this.
I know, but two interesting things. Question first is, in this 75-foot undisturbed buffer, where does the trail go in that?
Right through the middle.
So it's in the right-of-way.
The
But-
trail?
Yeah.
The
so it'd be-
9-foot wide one?
Although, like in this example, I think
It's additional
skirted-
right of way.
Right.
So
It
that's my
won't fit
question.
in
So
the
like,
standard right of way. You have to give additional.
So I'm curious. So the trail will go so it really wouldn't be a 75-foot disturbed buffer because the trail would be
And
cut
that's
into
another
it.
That's another fallacy of the trail is that, and especially in this New Providence Road, it's
Yeah.
that it cut into the rural viewshed because of the topography and everything. So it's a hard.
But that has to be in, that
But it has to be
15 feet
addressed.
has to be in that 75.
it has to, and it
Has to
certainly has to be addressed at some point of exactly how we're going to do that, because that does impact our rural.
Yeah.
And then the second comment I'll make is that, I don't see how you can lay that cost on this developer or that developer. That trail's not necessarily being used by that developer or this developer. It's going to be used by the people using the trail everywhere. I mean, that's a city cost. That's a taxpayer's in toto cost. I'm not on
Agreed.
city council, but
I agree.
if we're going to put a 10-mile trail up Freemanville Road, that shouldn't be laid on the landowners who are living on Freemanville Road. That's like putting in a new road somewhere.
Well, that's in our ordinance, I believe, so we'd have to relook at that.
We are looking at the ordinances. That's what we're doing here.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say. How
Right,
can
it's
you?
just another thing.
I think a lot of the stuff, like I said, I think a lot of stuff that we're talking about is not in this document, which,
Yes,
I know.
and that's
most
what
of it's not.
Yeah.
my presentation was.
I
Our
agree.
ordinance aren't in line with what we're saying our
Correct.
vision is.
Exactly.
We're conflicting in many places, and we just
We're
have to
almost
figure out
looking
what
backwards.
Yeah. I totally agree.
It sounds like based on, our conversations here that we're all on the same page. It's just now we've got to figure out how to get to the end product.
or how to get
How to
started
write
on it.
How to write it.
Well, I think we have a lot of ideas. And I think Scott's given us a lot from his viewpoint that I think we can incorporate into this. But again, I'm back to the thing, I don't want to have that standard, everybody has to follow this. Because then then the rule view is gone. Then it's not here anymore. And I think that trail, when we're looking at the trail, I think if you live on Freemanville Road and that trail's on Freemanville Road, the people that live on Freemanville Road need to contribute to the cost of it. they're going to be using it,
But everybody's going to be using it too.
but who's going to be predominantly using it?
Well, I mean, think about the. I mean,
I
this
mean,
is- this
that's
isn't
like an
an-
impact fee is what it is.
Most cities do require sidewalks to be part of the development.
Mm-hmm.
But that's, you know, again, it's a city. And we're saying, well, we don't want to be a city like Alpharetta. We want to be rural Milton.
Right.
And so if we go, they're not compatible.
And I hate to be technical, but that really is in the sidewalk ordinance. And so we would really need, as we're looking at the subdivision ordinance, to look at at that, because they're all
Yeah.
in
They're all tied
separate
together.
places.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. We're
Okay.
almost working backwards.
And-
I'm with you.
That's okay, and
with
we're,
you,
we're
Fred.
9 years
Everything-
as a city at this point. It's appropriate to review this stuff. You know, 9 years
No,
in,
I'm
are we
saying-
getting what we want as the end result?
We need to be getting these thoughts out, then going, working on it
Yeah.
and changing it
Yeah.
before you can really come to this
Well,
final piece of paper.
would you look at this as sort of a short-term solution until such time as, you know, development happens every day. I mean, the permits come in every day.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I mean, you can always go back and relook at this, but is it worth it to put something in, at least for short term, to at least start to protect our rural viewshed or enhance it from what it is? Or is it just not worth it? I mean, I guess that's,
I'm not sure we're protecting it with something like this.
that's a fair statement.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're coming up with here as that we don't think that where we're starting out on this is going to protect our rural view. Am I mistaken?
That's close.
Yeah, you're on the right track.
So if we're going to protect the rural view, let's do it. If not, then we're wasting our time and breath. Because this document that was put before us, I don't think this commission will never approve that.
I mean, really, as far as this document is concerned, I mean, the whole conservation area stuff, I fully believe is out. And as far as this document is concerned, the only thing that I think we can legitimately talk about this is the rural viewshed and the subdivision entrances and the setbacks and stuff. But I think Fred makes a good point, is a lot of the issues we have are with the internal workings of the subdivision. And, you know, I mean, we're going to see those, right? I mean, okay.
So can I understand why you think that the conservation section, when even Scott made the statement that we allow the riparian buffers, we allow floodplain, we allow all these things, it's almost like, I mean, I don't know if it's, maybe you're saying because it's already taken care of.
It's kind of
you don't
redundant.
need it.
Redundant.
Okay.
Yes.
It doesn't cost money to.
And the
to
hard
set
That
that
was
up.
why
that
we
is the
said we
required
took it out,
section, required-
according to my notes.
Yeah,
We
and again, you're,
Xed out that whole part.
yeah, I mean, last time we looked at this, we said, I think.
Strike it because
in
it was.
total,
Hell no.
no.
Right.
So are you guys okay with what's already on the books and just leave it alone with the 60-foot? I mean, I do believe it's brought some good things to the table in the sense of, just like Kathy said, I mean, we've had some really god-awful type of houses come, I mean, individual houses, not even necessarily in a subdivision, that would just be awful, that we were able to, you know, help them see the light, so to speak, that we wouldn't have had an opportunity before. I mean,
Right.
so, I mean, I don't think what's on the books now has been super negative. I mean, it may not be the answer to everything, but it's something, at least a holding pattern until
Well,
the whole thing
I
is
think
being
it's-
dealt with.
Yeah, I think it's been effective, and the issue is, should we expand it? And that's what we're asked to look at.
Well, I think where we're coming up with here is that really where we can do is in the subdivision rules.
And Scott's point on the whole minor and major plats, like what I would like to see, look at North Valley, see how that was developed. What in there, I mean, it's just a starting point. What in there
That's a great idea.
is not like how can we develop more of those? I mean, that's kind of where I'm going with it, and I don't.
Well, I think it's called, that particular developer, had an idea and a vision, and he was willing to do it and probably take a risk even at that point in time, and it paid off. I mean,
But
because
I guess my
typically
question
it's
is,
run by numbers. I mean, that's all
Yeah.
Right,
most developers do is how can I make the most money and do the least amount of work, and there's 80% of the population who's totally fine with an acre. Hey, in Alpharetta, they had a quarter acre. So to them, an acre is like great. So, I mean, I don't disagree with you. I'm kind of
Right.
playing devil's advocate.
Oh, yeah.
But it's,
Right, but there's some merit to absolutely doing what Peyton just said, is to go look and see what
what can
if
we
you do, if you have North Valley in mind, and you read our requirements today, where are we in conflict with the rules and regulations about developing?
and maybe Scott can
Right.
disagree with this. I don't think there's anything
Okay.
that you can't do that they did in North Valley. I think it's a matter of can you mandate somebody
there you
to
go.
do that.
Okay,
I
yeah.
mean,
But if we're
Have
also
you read your street guide
Yeah.
lately?
yeah.
I mean,
What does it say?
I mean, I haven't-
29 feet, curb and gutter.
But
With
you
a
do
5-foot
rural section.
sidewalk.
So is North Valley, is it a rural section? Or is
Well,
it
when it was developed in Fulton County, there was a lot more latitude on the roads. And there are only 2 now.
Say no
Now, I would
more.
like for them to
It's
be
full, yeah.
expanded.
Our Public Works Director, Carter Lucas, has worked with the fire marshal. And so what we have now in the subdivision regs is as narrow as we can get it. We're using the guidance from the fire marshal in terms of what he needs for fire trucks. Now, there is allowance for this rural look of a road with the natural swales on either side. That is on the books. It has been on the books. There are so few people who use it because it requires more land.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so, so you have to look at all of this to see what's going on. But right now, as Scott did say, there is one on the books that is being used, and it's been worked out with the fire marshal, and it's the narrowest we can make it. And that's what we can use.
So what if we said, first of all, remember, everybody keeps pointing out to us, we're only talking about a handful of larger lots that are left. Less than 10, right? Unless you do some assemblages out there.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I think there's more than that, but go ahead.
Okay, well, if there are more, great. My point will still remain the same. Because if you got more, then you're talking about choice. What if we say to the developer that wants to come in and develop a standard 1 acre lot development subdivision, but there are a lot of these requirements that go into that. But if you want to build something that's going to be more North Valley-like, well, a lot of that stuff goes away. Suddenly your
Yes.
curb and gutter goes away. Some of your other
But when
infrastructure
you
stuff.
take curb and gutter away, then you have to do a swale. You have to do a rural
I know.
section. You can't.
But you're also
just-
going to
and
end up,
then they don't-
you're going to end up with larger estate lots, you're going to end up with more expensive homes, and the developer is going to get their financial yield in the price bracket they're building in rather than the 1 acre lots. I'm just
I mean,
putting
yeah,
out there
I
as
mean,
an idea.
I'm not disagreeing. I mean, yeah, we'd love to have more of that, but I think it's so much is just driven by the economics of what people do.
All right,
now.
but let's maybe our next step is to take that compare and contrast. What would happen if we took a North Valley approach to some of the larger lots that are
Yeah.
left
Well,
out there?
what's the caveat is, don't forget, it was built under Fulton County rules and regs.
I know.
So we'll have to
But
look at
what do we
our-
have to do to go back to that?
Well, if we can, again, we've got a fire marshal that's looking
Yeah.
at this in a way that, for public safety point of view, but we'll be happy to do that. I mean, it's a good exercise.
I'd be willing to bet if there was a fire tonight, there isn't a fire truck that wouldn't find its way to every home in North Valley. Maybe hard to turn it around at the end of the cul-de-sac after the fire's over, but they probably can get there.
Well, I don't make those determinations, the fire marshal does.
Well, right,
Okay, well
yeah,
then,
I mean-
but we need to have the fire
Probably a good
marshal in
point.
here because this has been a bone of contention. We've heard about this for
Yes.
2 years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm to the point of ready to make a decision on curb and gutter, but we need to, if there's
So
some
am I.
laws, if there's some requirement in our county or our state that we have those, then by all means, let's have those. But so far, I've seen no evidence of that. I need to know from my own
Well-
sanity of why we have differences all over. I mean, we're all over the place with this.
Okay, with all due respect, though, do you want to have that discussion when you talk about the subdivision regs?
Yeah, I mean, I think that
It's-
needs to be.
It's
left.
on the, we're talking, when you're talking rural viewshed, there's a curb in front of this development, but not in front of this development.
You talking about the exterior of the road?
Yes, this is
Okay.
this rural design here. This is this, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, which is it?
Well, that's not so much the fire marshal as it is the way that the.
That's
road-
who does that?
It's public works, so.
Okay.
That's what my point is. Do we have to have a curb and gutter? And if so, here's a better question. Let me back up. Why do we have curb and gutter at the front of our developments?
Well, it's for water, the flow of water, I mean.
So that when you don't have one, that water just stands on the road and it just sits there and it
Well, I
gets
think-
20 feet deep?
I think it's not to say that you couldn't have it, but that meant that you could have it, but it means more property for the developer. So they're going to want to have as much property set aside for the lots and to yield as much lots. I mean,
Okay,
I'm not so convinced that.
Here's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about on this, not in here,
Right.
right here.
I know, it is still the same thing.
So before there is a development, right now there's a farm.
Right.
And the water comes from the sky and it goes off and it goes away. Yes? Okay, I'm sorry
Yeah.
I'm getting down to this point, but my point is something's happening to it now without a curb and gutter. Why is it that if you're going to put a development in here, that out here now I have to have a curb and gutter? I have not heard any information that explains that issue other than fire marshals, storm people. I just don't see it.
All right, well,
I just
think-
don't understand it.
But that's a fair question, and so I think at our next meeting, I'm happy to invite Carter.
Yeah, I think that'll be
You know,
good.
And if Matt Marietta is available, who's our fire marshal, we can invite him too. I would just encourage you not to get too into the weeds of the subdivision regs, because it is a separate document that we want to talk about.
There's nothing we
As-
can- yeah,
As
I
it
know.
relates to this conversation.
Nothing we can
I
do
think
about
that's-
that, I
that's-
know.
that's-
But we can
But-
stay on this
but-
outboard
Yeah.
as
Oh,
long
yeah,
as we're talking
absolutely,
about
yeah.
here,
Absolutely.
which are sidewalks, which are trails, which are curb and gutter, which are. I'm okay with developing it in any direction, but until we decide what that look is going to ultimately look like, what I believe to be true, what I believe to be true is the reason why we're putting curb and gutter here and then there and there is because one day, 20 years from now, we want to have curb and gutter everywhere. And we want to establish our interconnectivity of our urban environment. Okay? My belief is these people don't want an urban environment that's interconnected. They want it to remain a rural development, so why am I laying the groundwork to have urban when they don't want it? Now, I don't know how we need to get there, but that's what I've heard over 10
Totally
years.
agree.
Well, there was a shift in our early stages. Because there was for the longest time.
Oh.
You know, a lot of us as community activists used to go fight that stuff. Then we adopted some of that stuff as a city early on, that we wanted some interconnectability.
Well, we've had many in here which we were asking for sidewalks on both sides.
I got you. Are we still going that
and
way?
the-
And
That
if
was
we are,
the-
let's
but
go
that was-
down
those
that
were
way.
in- those were in
If we're
Yeah,
going
no,
there,
Subdivision.
Those fine either way. He
I'm
just wants to
fine.
know
I
where.
just want to know how to help because
Right.
I'm conflicted in what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing. I just don't know what we want.
I mean, I still do believe that whether it's curb and gutter and whether it's a rural section with no curb and a swale next to it is a matter of dimension and it's a matter of land. If you think about Old Milton Parkway on the east side, they don't have curb and gutter there. And you know why? Because they have huge amounts of right-of-way and they have swales on either side. So it's not to say that's very urban,
Yeah.
but for whatever reason, they developed it as what we call a rural section. So I really, and maybe Scott can address this, but I
Yeah.
mean,
Well,
I
let's
do-
let Carter
right.
address it.
I know,
Yeah.
but I'm
Well,
saying in a development, I think it's just cheaper to do curb and gutter.
Well, all right.
No.
I think
Scott-
what we need to find out what the rules are
Right.
and let Carter.
Oh, I mean,
Because there
We
may
are-
be a requirement that we have this, and if we do, then we got it. We just need to check that
Stick
box
by
and
and
move
move
on.
on.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I got a speaker.
Yeah.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
I appreciate your comments too, as a new citizen here. Like, when you go Birmingham Highway, there's a new
Can you
development.
tell us who you are?
I'm
Oh,
Scott
yeah.
Sawyer at 787 Quarter Path Lane off
Thank you.
Freemanville Road. There's a new development out on Birmingham Highway, I think. They're just building it now. And there's curb and gutter out there and a sidewalk that goes nowhere. All the pasture land around there is just flat. And it's
See, this is what we've been talking, is what
and
we've been
I'm
hearing.
like saying,
For,
why are they putting a sidewalk to nowhere, plus a curb and gutter to an entrance to a subdivision? It's not really a great subdivision anyway. I'm not sure the builder is. It looks like they don't do good work, and I think whoever that builder is. I've seen their work in town. They should not be putting a gutter there or sidewalk going to nowhere.
Right.
Unless you want to build an urban landscape all the way
we,
down Birmingham Highway
we,
future.
we hear you
This is
loud
what
and
I'm
clear.
talking about.
absolutely.
Build a road.
That's
That's
yeah,
exactly
that's-
what we've been saying.
That's what we,
Thank you,
yeah,
sir.
For sure.
that's part
But
of the.
there's an aesthetic. They actually curve their sidewalk around the telephone pole. So it's got contour.
I think what we need to know, and we need to know what's required from a public safety standpoint and from an environmental standpoint. There are some things that we know we can't get around. And those things, then, as I think like Paige said, we'll check that box and move on because we can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
But the things that we can, let's do it. I guess
Well,
that's-
and there are things that you can change, but again, a lot of them relate to the subdivision regs. So
That's-
we keep coming back.
That's
to
what I'm-
the
yeah,
subdivision
that's
regs,
what I said.
Which is a major document, which,
I think
so.
I think what Noel's saying is, I mean, what does that entail? What he was talking about, the curb and gutter. That's subdivision regs. That's not.
And
That's not this.
Well,
that's a
as
major
it affects
impact.
this, I think that's a good discussion.
Okay.
But actually talking about changing them and modifying them and all that, that is a conversation for a later day, I believe, when you're talking about the subdivision regs.
Right, okay.
Does that
That's
make
right.
sense?
The internal stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to
Okay.
have to decide.
Good point.
We got our internals, we got our externals.
Okay.
But to a certain extent, and we have to have had this conversation tonight to get to here, where we can say that, because when we're talking about the rural design or the rural view shed,
Right, it has an effect.
it has an impact on the interior of those because we're talking about how much land are or not.
Kind of like what we just said. If we're gonna take that extra 25 feet, we're gonna move the houses up closer. So it's a given. I think that's one of those things that we need to talk about. Is would you rather have the rural feel on the outside,
Yeah.
but you're gonna maybe limit it on a few lots on the inside, I guess.
Yeah, if you
don't
took
know.
if you
I mean,
took
that's-
every if you
I mean-
took the except for the width of the road in North Valley and you laid it out straight and it became Freemanville Road, there isn't anybody who would complain about looking at any single one of those lots. So we have to find that balance. So
Well, that's Dinsmore. You know, you drive by it on Dinsmore and you like it.
yeah.
That's the exterior. That's a semi-busy road getting more busy. So that would be, I
And
guess that
Dinsmore
would need
doesn't
to,
have any sidewalks.
no, or curb and gutter.
It does right at the entrance to the one subdivision, doesn't it? That's the one on the right before you get to yours.
And you know, we've talked
That's a
about
new one.
this sidewalk
No,
thing,
no, it's an old one.
and yet we've had people come
Right past
here
the
and
front.
want sidewalks.
Yeah.
They want them.
Yeah, I think that's.
And so we're caught, you're sitting here, you got one group, we want to maintain this rural view. You got another group, well, yeah, but we want sidewalks too.
Or trails.
Yeah, or trail.
Actually, they'd love
I mean, I think the community's very. This is the thing. The community's very loud about they want trails.
Yes.
But they don't want paved. I mean, it's one thing to want trails. It's another thing to want these massive sidewalks. I mean, I think it's all. I mean, we're not calling it what it really is. I guess is what
Yeah.
I'm saying. I mean, so what do we want it to look like? Is my theory. That's all.
And where will it go on this drawing? That's what I'm saying. Does it go in the red hashed area?
Yeah, it would take up the first, what,
Absolutely.
15 feet? Is that what you said, Robin, the first 15 feet?
Well, no, all that is, most of that red area is supposed to be the property owners. That's the view shed. So as we were saying, technically the trail should be outside of the person's
So,
property.
so the undisturbed buffer,
But then that,
But they have to dedicate it, so that's what I'm saying.
Go ahead,
is-
Fred.
but that's gonna now add another 15 feet.
It could, yes.
No, but now we're up to,
And
now we're up to
then once they dedicate the
115
property
feet.
That's what I'm
to
saying,
fit it
yeah.
in,
No, no.
then you're gonna push it
No,
in
it's gotta-
some more.
That can't work.
I would,
see, that's a big,
If we change the interior regulations on the yield for the subdivision.
Or we can always say
150?
that trails are allowed in the first 75 feet or something.
yes.
That's what I would say.
If that's what
Yes,
you have to do.
absolutely,
Under
I-
those
absolutely.
circumstances.
That
Right.
would be.
that's what we'd have to do.
That's the
what you
wording.
have to do.
And it's
Otherwise, then you're
and it's
really
not gonna be-
creating-
See, that's
Trail.
kind of what I'm, okay.
Right, capture
gonna be
that.
Can we, can we
trail.
can we
And it-
put that in?
But,
It's not gonna be a trail everywhere.
That's
right,
correct.
There's a
That is
trail
correct.
plan.
exactly.
correct.
But it
So if
is
you know
in
if you're
the
building in this
75 feet.
section, you're gonna have a trail.
And we
Right.
might have enough right of way that we don't, even if there's a trail there, we might not even need it, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's really on a case by case, but then you're creating a hardship is what I see. If You're really pushing it back, as Fred
Right.
just mentioned.
No. Well, also, as we're on the view shed, to Scott's point, again, with these, to be facing the road, I think we, somehow we gotta incorporate that. I mean, on,
Well,
Can-
I
what-
might say, one of the issues you're gonna have to address though are all the driveways. If you've got a whole series of driveways with curb cuts, you know, then you get into a safety point of view and, can you see down the road properly, you know, you get all that stuff. And again, that's a Carter question next week, because
Yeah.
he really administers that about, you know, when you have one driveway in on a subdivision, they're all coming off that one driveway, everyone's got their own individual,
Right.
It could be problematic from a sight distance point of view, pulling out and, you know,
well, we could do it on, as Scott said, we'll just say that for gravel roads.
Are those regulations state regulations now for distance? They are state?
I think they have a general,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
Okay.
well, I mean, I think it's
What?
just a standard by the,
yeah, so you have to be able to see, you know.
If you're not on a state road though, if you're on Freemanville,
well, no, it's still the same.
Still the
I mean,
same
And
stuff.
if the roads, if you're traveling at a speed that, you know, if you're at 10 miles an hour, probably not, but most roads are, you know, are built for 35 miles an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, there's standards, you know, whether it's a state.
yeah, that's
or
why I was
whether-
challenging it. If it's a state standard, I can't mess with it.
No, it's
If
like
it's, if it's a
IT,
self-imposed
international.
Milton standard, we can mess with it.
No,
Well,
it's the national that is
Right, right.
accepted by the state, accepted by the local.
you know, the problem, you don't have a problem with it, you have to have the entrance on the main road anyway. You could have back door garages coming off those streets.
I mean, you could have an alley or
Yeah.
something, but
Oh,
most
yeah,
people
I
don't
mean,
want
you could have them
alleys.
coming off the street if you wanted to. I mean, that's not a problem to be solved. That's not a problem, so let's don't try to solve something that doesn't need solving.
Correct. So you think we know where we're going?
Our next meeting, what I'm taking away is that we are going to invite Carter Lucas and Matt Marietta to talk about roads, trails. And then also, we're going to look at, what's the subdivision
North Valley.
North End, just to kind of,
And
okay.
we're gonna look at the guidelines that were used then, and can they be picked up now?
Okay.
Is that feasible?
Okay.
Okay.
What's legally required?
Right. And, you know, we can do a little matrix, okay?
Okay.
And let Scott have his gravel road with dirt.
Absolutely.
Robin's like, I hate y'all.
It's up to
I
public
know.
works.
I know.
I grew up on gravel.
But I mean,
road
that's
and
where
dirt
we want to
roads.
go.
I mean, I'm not, and
That's
I'm not
where
so
we
sure
want to
that
go.
they would be
Still have a
opposed to
dirt
it if it
road.
was a private, because Carter doesn't want to maintain.
Right. If it, but if it's, but if it's
No,
private,
private.
He's fine with
He-
what we have, but
yeah.
he doesn't want more to have.
But Scott said private.
Right, I know, I don't
So-
disagree, yeah.
And then if I might just say that the idea is that in February, you'll take a final vote on this document that's in front of you, so it can be.
Yeah, that was, I guess, because it was deferred to
It was deferred to
February, and I would like, for
And
y'all to
then the
ask
next-
council
Would
to,
be
for us to open up the subdivision regs, and for us to get the subdivision regs, kind of as we vote on this, then we
We may want
Yeah.
to.
Do we move into
And
that?
I'll
We may
make
wanna-
mention of
And
that.
that's going to be
Yes.
much longer, I know.
Right, that's,
We may want
that's,
to add another work session between now and the end of February.
Yeah, because it's not till January, the next work session is our regular kind of scheduled meeting. It's
Right.
January
January,
27th, so we have a lot of time.
What's on the agenda then?
This?
Well,
There's
always
going to be a
something.
text amendment. Wait, let's see, I'm bringing up a text amendment about the
I think we-
TDRs for Deerfield.
that's
And
just,
so that'll be going to you in January. So
Right.
that's really right now the only thing I have.
I think we'll definitely need another work session, just based on what
Yes.
we've gathered with the more questions we've had, I guess. So I don't
But if
know
we
what the
can get
schedule looks like.
those resolved, then this pretty well comes together.
Do what?
Well,
I said, if we can get,
Oh, yeah.
it's a
this
big
is-
step in the
I
right
mean,
direction.
I mean, you are correct. I mean, we could be able to knock it out we could be able to knock it out in January and then vote in February.
in February.
Yeah.
With the work
Because
session.
because really all we're talking about is the view shed, really, and what's involved in the view shed and how is the view shed on what we want to do, how does it impact the interior. I mean, we could, with nothing on our agenda in January, we probably could be able to knock it out. I guess I'm gonna leave that up to y'all. Would y'all rather work a little longer one night than have to come here 2 nights, you know?
I
Yeah,
think
the-
in
the
either
item
work
on-
session.
What do you think,
What's
Mel?
the advertising
There's no
requirement
way
for
we
a?
can do
You don't think
for
so?
a
You
work
think we need another
session
work
for-
session?
We need
Tell me.
more
Is it
information
30
first.
days?
No. It's
I
like
think we
24
need
hours.
clarity.
I mean,
We still don't have
So
any
we-
clarity
so we
can
on
have the
any
January
one issue.
So
Right.
we need
We
another
come
work
up with
session.
it.
See how
That's what-
far we
that's what you're
get.
saying.
We just need
And if we need
answers.
another work session
I don't
between
need
the
work
January
sessions.
meeting
I need
and
to be able to
February.
ask
But we need to have-
vote,
somebody
we
to
could
go
put
to
it-
freaking-
I know, but we need to have
January
a public,
is-
we need to
is
have a
a
work
work
session
session. We're not
for
having a
that to
meeting.
take place, is what I'm
It wasn't
saying.
a scheduled meeting in
That's the-
January.
no,
That's the
we are scheduling a
predicament.
meeting. We have one item that has to come
I'm with
before
you.
Oh,
Yeah.
when did that
Again,
change?
But
We
it's a
need
small
less
item.
philosophy
I mean,
and more
literally
answers.
Well, yeah,
not
I'm
to
not
take-
gonna disagree with that. Yeah.
Peyton,
Yes.
if we had a work session and had our people there at the work session to answer these questions ahead of the January meeting,
You mean have the work session in January, in early January,
yes.
and then we have our meeting?
Then have our meeting.
Yeah.
If we don't have a time restriction on when we advertise it to have the meeting, I'd
No, I mean,
I'd
we're
like to
pretty
see us have a
flexible.
middle
I
of
mean, it's
January
not-
Yeah.
meeting.
But your January meeting only has one small little item on it.
So we could actually have the, adjourn the meeting and have a work session.
Well, that's how I planned it
Yeah.
originally, but you
Yeah.
can do whatever you guys want
You know,
to.
there really isn't any reason not to do that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's,
I can't imagine it taking more than 20 minutes. I mean, it was just something that we should have included in the Deerfield form-based code. We didn't, so it's just moved to correction.
I mean, in the meantime, what questions do you have that you want answered?
I want to know which one of those pictures I'm working toward. That's all I want to know. Pick one and tell me I'm trying to do this
I
everywhere.
picked two, actually.
Okay. I don't care which ones, but so far I've never heard anybody say we're going here or we're going here. I understand how Deerfield Parkway looks. I got it, and we could develop a lot of area that way. Is that what you're trying to do over here, or no?
Okay.
It's that simple. It really is that
Yeah.
simple, and I need clarity.
So do you-
I
so-
can help you do it, but I gotta know what I'm doing. And right now, I have no idea.
So you mean tell you what picture I want?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You can tell them which ones I want too.
Oh yeah, Gary gave me his.
Okay, because I can help you. We can write that up.
Yeah.
I can help you write that up, but until somebody picks that, we're just going to have more philosophy like we had tonight.
We send Noel, Mark, what picture?
Yep, I'll write it down. Go look at it tomorrow.
You do that?
It's in the presentation.
Yeah,
The-
yeah, we got the slideshow.
Email back after the meeting.
Yeah.
That was
Robin,
I thought
I need a
that's
copy
easy.
of that. I don't have that.
Oh yeah, I was about to say, I can show
send
you.
me that?
I can show you what picture I want.
Well, you can't, it's too big. I have to see. if
No,
we can
she
put-
couldn't, yeah,
It's
go
too
ahead.
big. I mean, I think we were gonna, Michelle was gonna try to have it put on the website, and then you could go to the
Oh, well,
website.
then let's do that. Let's-
Right, because it's a huge, it's a very large file. so-
Yeah.
Wasn't it last meeting?
Oh, you weren't here?
I don't remember.
And I've got it as a PDF
He
too.
sent it to us.
Yeah.
It's much smaller. If you
Okay.
it's
when
what
we
you
send
I
it to
mean,
you.
but I think Fred has problems.
Okay.
I had a problem getting,
Oh, you did?
with, yeah.
You gotta turn the crank fan.
All right.
You guys, Fred, you go to
I got-
somebody's
I
house.
gotta
and
get-
watch it.
Commodore
I gotta get
64
this mic
stuff
working fast.
I'll send it to you tonight.
Yeah, because
I'll
we,
send you-
What, the one?
Yeah, the one. The one.
I had two.
I got one.
Okay.
But
Have you got a copy of it?
but
You got a
those
copy with you?
pictures.
Are we still, we're still going, right?
Yeah. Those. I mean, what we're gonna send you. I mean, I understand what you're saying as far as it's going to affect the trails and all that stuff. But I mean, as far as undisturbed buffer, I don't know if it's going to affect that too much because I understand what you're saying. On one side of the street, there's a completely undisturbed forest, and then there's a subdivision. But on the other side of the street, it's even though you have the large buffer, it's a clear cut buffer.
It's a clear cut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then somebody's got to mow that grass.
Yeah.
Whereas over here, they don't.
I'll send
But
you.
this guy's got
I'll
curb,
send you
but
my
this guy's
picture.
got sidewalk, but this
I'll
guy's
send
got a
you my
water
picture.
meter. Which
You
one
can
of
just
them?
forward in my email.
You send it to you?
Send me
You mean
the picture.
FedEx? You mean print out FedEx it to you?
No.
You mean
Just
courier
send-
it?
Just send a picture.
Okay.
I'll get it.
All right. Are we good?
Send us all a picture.
Yeah, I will. I'll send it all.
Will,
What else?
will they be able to, on our next meeting, will they be able to resolve the requirement, or at least answer the question of when we need a decel lane and when we don't?
I'll put that down.
Yeah, boy, oh boy.
A lot of it's based on the number of cars, the speed. It's hard to say it's X or Y. It's all dependent on
Okay, well,
Traffic
for,
flow.
situation.
for example, there's no decel lane to turn on to Phillips Circle on from Freemanville Road.
We don't need one.
Those
Why
are
not?
harder questions.
Yeah, those are.
Yeah, what-
I'm just saying, there's 100 houses down that
We
road.
don't admit
So,
so, yeah.
And their pit
Well,
roads, cars are going 55 miles an hour up there. I know the speed limit says 45, but they're going 55 or 60.
Right, yeah.
So,
Everybody
but
goes
there's
fast.
not a
45 is a
decel lane to
suggestion.
turn left on Red Road.
In
You
part
see
of
what
the
I'm
answer
saying?
to
It's
that,
just
I'm
like,
saying
we're
that
just, what?
65.
No, I get you 100%, man.
I'm trying.
All those thoughts.
I'm trying.
We're
We'll
with
get
you,
some
brother.
answers.
I'm not trying to
And
waste
that's
y'all's
going to be
time.
done
Oh no.
after the
We're all on the
text
same
amendment
page.
meeting.
Yeah, I get you.
frustration.
I get
We're
you.
all with
Is
you.
that how you're
on
going to
this.
advertise it, Ron?
How
Cars
are we
are
going
on blast.
I know, but I'm
The-
not trying to make a
the
problem
work
for cars.
session
I'm trying to
hours.
just
Get the answers.
I mean,
You're trying to get answers.
That's like
I already
the darn
advertised
subdivision
it
over
starting at 7.
near the Publix. It's ridiculous.
What-
Well, that's okay.
I hear you loud and
After
clear.
the regular
That
schedule.
presentation.
That's what I mean.
Oh, it
you
was
made
perfect.
Or we
was
can just have
invaluable
it as a
in my
discussion.
opinion.
Oh, it was absolutely
During
perfect
my
because I
meeting.
just
Have a very
it showed two sides of the road.
Okay.
Not a big
And
deal.
they're
And that's when they'll be here.
I'm getting
Right,
headache
yeah,
because
we'll have
I'm
them here
trying
for
to,
next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to solve a problem, but I don't have complete information to what we're trying to
Well,
resolve. It's just,
That's what we're trying to get to.
Okay.
Okay,
I agree. We don't have.
I guess you really even have to.
What?
I think we're as far as we can
We
go.
good? Yeah. I think yeah. We're as far as we can go tonight.
do we have to make a motion?
No.
No, it's shut.
We just walk away?
Yeah.
He said no.
Now, while I've got you all, don't forget, I think you're all been sworn in for CPAC. You have not? Okay. He was in Florida. Oh, all right. Well, come to the meeting. I can't swear you in. Yeah.
The 14th, you can come either Monday, the 14th, or the 20th.
No, you have, the mayor has to
Because the
swear
mayor
you
has
in.
to swear you in.
So if you want to come to the next council meeting next Monday night,
It's a work session.
It's a work session, but he'll be here, and we'll get you sworn in.
Can you do that? If not, you can come the 21st, and you just will be the unofficial CPAC member.
Yeah, you can come the 21st.
No.
And we,
Wait, just what?
well, if you can't, but the following, the mayor needs to swear you in, and even if you're not sworn in, come to the meeting.
Yeah, we'll let you come.
And, which is next week. It's,
Does it have to be at a public meeting that he's sworn in?
No, he could.
He could go to the mayor's office.
Yeah, but we don't know what his schedule is. It's just, you know.
I will get this done. I promise.
all right, some Monday, just come some Monday, we'll swear you in. And then, so the meeting is next week, and I hope it's on all your calendars. I think is it Wednesday or Thursday?
I think it's.
The 16th, whatever night that is.
That's the Wednesday.
Yeah.
The Wednesday.
Okay. Wednesday at 6:30. And, so it will be the first meeting. It's just gonna be an introductory meeting, and so, we'll have the ARC people here. And,
You're gonna give us like an overview of what the goal.
yeah, right, that's right. And, And I do like to brag a bit. I read in the paper the other day that Forsyth is also updating
Yes, I saw it.
their comp plan. They haven't sworn in they haven't chosen their group, never mind sworn them in. They're the same timetable we have. We're doing ours in-house with the help of ARC. It's going to cost me 2 lunches, I think. $255,000 for their consultant. It was unbelievable, unbelievable.
And I wonder if anywhere in their work plan, there's a meeting with the city of Milton, Director of Community Development, to see how their plans might or might not.
Right, right,
On the edge of our city.
yes.
Yeah, on a certain area.
But I can't believe $255,000 for less than 9 months of work, because they don't even have a group yet to talk to. So they have to start sometime after January. They have to be done by August at the very latest, and that's really pushing it. It really should be July. So, in any event, I just think we're so much farther ahead of this, and really have got the whole thing, I think, pretty well moving along, ready to roll. The people from ARC are very good. They've done this with other communities and other counties, so you'll enjoy working with them.
Some of the same people we dealt with before.
So, who were actually the consultants who worked as a consultant on this? Allison Duncan, who now works for ARC, was part of the consulting team, I think, that works with you all. Yeah, so she's very good. So in any event, so I look forward to this. It should be a very good initiative as we move forward. So.
And it's so timely because it's one where, that plan, intersects with this, what we're doing, it's kind of.
Not us meeting.
Yeah, right. Right, that's right. Well, they already are, some of them. Right, that's right. Yeah, Forsyth.